Hilchos Maachalos Asuros Perek Shvi, the laws of forbidden foods, chapter 7. The topic today is chelev. Chelev means fat, but it's specifically a reference to forbidden fat. Every animal has two types of fat, chelev and shuman. In the Talmud and halachic literature, they both mean fat, but chelev is used for forbidden fats, shuman is used for permitted fats. So this chapter is all about the forbidden fats. And at the end, we're going to also return to yesterday's topic, which is the issue of blood. Not consuming blood from an animal. And it gets a little bit anatomically involved. I have many diagrams that I was able to obtain from Art Scroll. They have in their volume of Talmud, on the third chapter of Chulin, which is all about the inside of an animal and all the relevant laws to it. They have tremendous illustrations, and I use them extensively today. So we thank them. And B'ezrat Hashem will all understand the Rambam better because of them. It says the Rambam halacha aleph, ha'oichel kezayis chelev. If one consumes an olive-sized portion of forbidden fats, and we're going to soon define what exactly are the forbidden fats. But if you eat an olive-sized portion of forbidden fat, b'mezid chayav kares, b'shoigeg mevi chatas kvua. If you do so purposely, you're liable to excision. If you do so inadvertently, you have to bring the fixed standard karban chatat, the sin offering. Ubefeidish amra Torah. Torah says explicitly, she'einei chayav ela al shloisha minei behema tehira bilvad. The forbidden fats are only liable in the three types of animals that are called behema, and they're kosher. Shenemar, as it says clearly, this is the verse on the screen. Kol chelev, shoir, v'chesev, v'ez, lo yisoi chelu. The forbidden fats from an ox, from a sheep, from a goat, that's the ones you cannot eat from. So all the animals that are categorized as chayot, for example, beasts that are kosher, a deer, a gazelle, those types of animals, their fats are actually all permitted. All of them? Yeah, all of them. The only time it's forbidden is kosher, domesticated animals. You have to meet both criteria. And once you're dealing with that type of animal, doesn't matter what type of animal it was. Bein sha'achal mechelev shchuta, whether you eat the forbidden fats of an animal that was properly slaughtered. Bein sha'achal mechelev nevela utreifa shalahen, whether the kosher animal died or the kosher animal became mortally wounded, and you ate from the chelev, you also get a special punishment for eating the forbidden fats.
So this fat that's on like a chaya, like a deer. Okay, this one you can even call chelev.
That's right. Avol shar behema v'chaya, but any other animal or beast, bein tmeya, bein tahira, whether it's non-kosher or kosher, chelba kibsara. The rule is you treat its fats like it's flesh. If it's not kosher animal, same way you can't eat the meat, you can't eat the fat. If it's a kosher animal, the same way you could eat the meat, you could eat the fat. Also a stillborn of these three animals, a cow has a stillborn, a sheep has a stillborn, a goat has a stillborn, its fat will be like its meat. If you're going to eat an olive-sized portion from the chelev, you'll get lashes like somebody who eats a dead animal, but you won't get lashes or you won't get karet like somebody who eats chelev, fat, because it's a stillborn. And the fat is considered to be like the meat. Halacha base. So now that Rambam has to answer a question that we've come up with a couple of times already, which is there's a principle that says, Ein isur chalal isur. A prohibition cannot take effect over and above another prohibition. So if an animal, while it's alive, if its fats are prohibited, so then when it dies, when it becomes a dead animal in nevela, or it gets mortally wounded at treifa, that's another prohibition on the animal. So how could there be two prohibitions taking effect at the same time? So like the Rambam said before, when you eat the fat from a dead animal, it's also prohibited. It shouldn't be prohibited on two counts. So the Rambam explains. Halacha beis. Ha'oichel mechelev nevelo treifa. Somebody who eats from the forbidden fats of an animal which died or mortally wounded. Chayav mishum oichel chelev u mishum oichel nevelo treifa. You're liable on two counts, for eating forbidden fat and for eating dead animal or mortally wounded animal. Why? So the Rambam gives us the explanation. Because when the animal dies or becomes mortally wounded, the scope of the prohibition is expanded. Now it applies not just to the forbidden fats, but to all the meat. All the meat is a carcass. All the meat is mortally wounded. So therefore, noisaf al hachelev, that prohibition now extends back to the fats as well. And therefore you get two sets of lashes, one for the fats and one for nevela, for eating dead or mortally wounded meat. Halacha gimel, hashaychet behemo matzah bashlil. A person slaughters an animal, a pregnant mother, and he finds in it an unborn fetus. Kol chel boy mutter. All of the fats are permitted because it's considered part of the meat of the mother. It doesn't have its own identity yet. Va'afilu matzah chai, even if you find it alive, because it's like a limb of the mother. But if it reached full term, if its gestation has been completed, and you find it alive inside the mother, even though it never took a step on the ground, and it doesn't require a ritual slaughtering, like we saw 2 days ago. Chel by aser, its fat is still prohibited, and you're liable to excision for it. And you have to remove all the strands of tissue and all the membranes that are forbidden, as we're going to see in the end of this chapter. Kishara behemoth, like any other animal. Once it's reached full term, even if it's discovered inside the mother, it has its own identity, totally forbidden, all the forbidden fats, and all of the forbidden tissues and membranes, as we'll go through in a minute. Halacha dalid, a person sticks his hand into the womb of an animal. And he cuts off a piece of the fat from the fetus, which has already reached full term, and he took it out. Were he to eat it, he would be liable for it, as if he cut it off from the forbidden fat of the mother herself. Because it's the months of pregnancy which cause the fats to be forbidden. Since this baby is full term, it already has its own identity and its own fats are forbidden. Even if you cut it off inside the mother, but you took it out, you're liable for eating chaylev. Says the Rambam, let's define the actual forbidden fats. Shleisha chalavim hein, shechayavin alein kares. There are 3 areas of fat that are forbidden and liable to excision. And they're learned actually from sacrifices, from korbanot. In Parshas Vayikra, when the Torah deals with the basic sacrifices, it always says which fats have to be brought on the Mizbeach. And the Talmud learns out that whatever fats have to be brought on the Mizbeach from regular sacrifice become forbidden in a regular animal. In other words, they're kind of like dedicated to Hashem. We don't eat them. And they are chaylev sha'al hakerev, the fats that are on the digestive system. We'll soon define this more exactly. V'sha'al shtei akloyos, the fats on the kidneys. V'sha'al aksalim, and the fats on the flanks, the sides of the animal. Aval ha'alya, but the fatty part of the tail, muteres ba'achila, is permitted to be eaten, even though in the Torah it says chelbo ha'alya tmima, the fats of the tail have to be brought to the mizbeach. This is not one of the examples that's forbidden. It says the Rambam le'nikras chelev ela le'inyan karban bilvad. The tail is only called fatty with regards to the sacrifice. K'moisha nikru chalavim kloyos v'yaseres hakaved le'inyan karban. The same way, in the karban actually, the whole kidney and the big lobe of the liver is called fat with regards to the sacrifice, but they're not actually chelev. They're not actually fats. They're a limb, they're a tail, they're a kidney, they're part of the liver. They're just called chelev in the context of sacrifices, like we actually have similar expressions in the Torah. Look at this. When Yaakov and Yosef's brothers came to Egypt, after discovering that Yosef was Yosef, so what does it say here? Paro said, "V'ichlu es chelev haaretz." You guys should eat the fat of the land. Now, that's an expression, right? Doesn't mean there's no fat in the land. It means the good part of the land. Or in Ha'azinu, it says that the Jewish people ate a lot of fatty foods. Chelev kilyo schita. The fat of the kidneys of the wheat stalks. Now, wheat doesn't have kidneys, wheat doesn't have fat. It means great, juicy wheat stalks. So the Rambam says, chelev haaretz v'chelev kilyo schita, the same way we use the expression. The fat of the land and the fat of the wheat stalks, shehu tuvam, which means the best. So sometimes the word chelev could mean the best. Because we remove these parts of the animal from the sacrifice to burn them for Hashem, nikru chelev, they're called fats because they're the best parts. She'ein sham davar toiv elo hamuram lashem. There's nothing good in this world better than what's removed, separated for God. Ulekach nemar betrumas ma'aser. For the same reason, it says by trumat ma'aser, when you give the donation to the Levi 10%, he has to give 10% to the Kohen. So what does it say? Baharimchem es chelboi mimenu. When you remove the fatty part from it. It's no fatty part from produce, no fatty part from fruits. Again, the same concept, the best. What's given to Hashem is called the best. So the parts of the animal that are actually fats on the digestive organs, fats around the kidneys, those are called chelev because they're literally fats. But any other part of the sacrifice that's called chelev is not forbidden, it's just called chelev because it's good. So returning to the main topic at hand, we have 3 forbidden fats. Fats on the digestive system, fats on the kidneys, and fats on the flakes. Now to understand what these fats are, let's take a look at a diagram of the inside of an animal. So one of the signs that makes an animal kosher is called ma'alei geira, that it chews its cud. Right? I told you then, when we learned chapter 1, that we're going to expand more on chewing its cud in this chapter 7. So the way we know animals today, ruminants are the animals that re-chew their food. They have 4 stomachs. The way it goes is like this. This is the veshet here. This is the food pipe. The food goes down the food pipe without being chewed. Kosher animals, initially they just bite the food and swallow it. They don't chew it in the beginning. It goes down the food pipe and it goes into what's called the kares, the rumen. This is the first stomach here. It's the big stomach. And what happens there is the food just begins to decay. It's whole pieces of food and it's starting to rot.
It's not rotting, it's just getting digested.
Well, it's starting to get digested. From there, it passes into the beis hakaisos, right here, the reticulum, second stomach. In this stomach, and we observe this today, the food is processed into little balls, ball-like materials. Okay? At this point, it's regurgitated back up the esophagus, and that's when the animal chews it. So it goes through the first stomach and the second stomach, then it comes back up, and now it's chewed down. When the animal finishes chewing it down, it passes all the way through down to the meses, or the hemsis. This is called the amesum. The amesum is the third stomach, and in the third stomach, what happens is the water is separated from the food. The liquid is separated from the actual solid of the food. And from there, it passes into the keva, that's here at the bottom, the abamesum. By the way, these stomachs you could actually eat already. Like they'll actually serve them in restaurants. The amesum, the abamesum. This is where the gastric juices of the animal system will actually fully digest the food. And at this point, they go into this little pipe here, which is the beginning of the intestinal system. You can't really see it. We'll see it a little further in the chapter, where the food exactly goes. Now, this is a cutaway. This is a cutaway of the stomachs where you can see all the stomachs. When you actually look from the outside, this is what it looks like. The whole digestive system is covered by 2 layers of fat. This one here is called the greater omentum in English. It covers the whole bottom of the digestive system. And then you have what's called the lesser omentum over here, this part of the fat, that covers the top of the digestive system. Now, if you look in the Rambam, what does he say? He says, in the last halacha, he said, chelev sha'al hakerev. The fat on the stomachs. That's this one, the lesser omentum here. This is the forbidden fat in the Torah. There's also what's called chelev hamechaseh hakerev. The Rambam didn't mention them here. We're going to soon talk about it. That's the greater omentum. That's also forbidden, but doesn't carry karet, doesn't carry excision. So, knowing this, says the Rambam like this: Halacha vav, chelev sha'al hameses v'sha'al beis hakaisos. The fats that cover the amesum and the reticulum, that's the top 2 stomachs here, what we call again the lesser omentum, hu ha'chelev sha'al hakerev. That's what the Torah describes as the fat on the digestive system. Not the bottom stuff. That's not the karet part. Now we move on. The fats that is at the joints of the thighs. Maybe we can see it over here. Okay, here again. You see this is the second stomach. This is the amesum, and here are the thighs. Okay, this is the animal from the side view. That's the spine here. The backbone, right here, in the middle. Says the Rambam, that fat over here in the middle, also chayav and olav kares. You're liable to excision, V'hu ha'chelev she'al ha'ksalim. This is the fat on the flanks. Now, as the commentators explain it, this is not the only fat on the flanks. Huh? No, that's going to be tomorrow's subject. Gidan Asher, something else. The commentators explain, look, if you look, this is going to be better. Here's a back view. Okay, this is from the back of the animal. So, you have all this meat with patterns of fat all around, and on top and on bottom. A lot of those fats are also called chelev she'al ha'ksalim, the fat on the flanks. But the Rambam is saying, even this fat, or also this fat, that's on the inside of the joints, of the thighs, is also included in the fats on the flanks and is forbidden. Now, v'yesham chelev al hakeva, says the Rambam, furthermore, there is, let me see if I can find the picture here. Can you see this here? There's a lot of names and arrows. Again, this is borrowed from the Art School Gemara. But I'm just going to use this for imagery. This here is the keva, the abamesum. Now, I don't know if you can appreciate it over here, but the abamesum is curved on the bottom and more straight on the top. Okay, there's fats covering it from all sides, but on the bottom it's curvy, and on the top it's flat. Maybe here we can see it a little better also in this picture. It's a little hard to see. This is the abamesum over here, the bottom. So on the bottom it's got a round curve, and on the top it's got more of a flatness. So the Rambam says, "V'yesham chelev ala keva akum k'moy keshes." There is a fat on the abamesum, on the bottom stomach, that's round like a bow. That's the curvy part on the bottom. So basically the membrane of this fat that's covering it on the bottom, v'hu ha'asr, that's what's forbidden. The chut mashuch k'moy yeser. Then there's also a strand that's strung like the, what's the name for the thing across the bow? The string. But you pull back, whatever. Huh? The string that goes down the bow, that's what the Rambam is referring to. It runs on top of the abamesum. V'hu mutter, that's permitted. So the curvy fat is forbidden, and the straight fat is permitted. That's how the Talmud defines it. It's like a bow and arrow, right? You have the bow, and then you have the strand that goes this way. So this is this over here. The bottom part is forbidden. The drawstring, is that what it's called? Only in these illustrations it's very easy to see because they've defined the limbs. When you're dealing with an actual animal, the meat and the fats is all piled onto each other. You have to have a professional guy to show you what's what.
So the Kohanim had to really know this stuff.
There's actually a whole field.
Yeah, even for the little town.
I'm saying that there's a whole field called nikur. Nikur means picking out the forbidden fats and the forbidden tissues. It's a separate talent from shchita. You have guys that are slaughterers, and they hand it off to the menakrim. Menakrim is people that will pick out because they know exactly. Yeah, they know what to pick out and everything.
They know exactly.
Oh yeah.
They know exactly.
Our grandparents knew how to do this stuff.
No, my great grandfather's sheikh.
They open up a chicken. They know this, that. We don't know. I don't know my right hand from my left hand over there. Chutin shebachelev, the thin nerves and blood vessels that run through the forbidden fats, asurin, and they're forbidden. The ein chayavin alein kares, and you're not liable though for excision because they aren't the actual fats. Says the Rambam Malach Hazayin, general rule. Chelev shehabasar choife oiser. We're going to use this picture again to illustrate this. Any fat that's totally covered by meat. Okay, I'm not sure how clear you can see it over here, but look. The pink is meat, and the yellow is fat. So you see here, chelev shehabasar choife oiser, fat covered by muscle. That's the middle. My arrow is very thick, but the middle yellow line here.
Yeah, there's layers.
Yes. So all the middle yellow lines that are covered by meat, those are not forbidden. Those are covered by meat. They're part of the meat. Mutter.
That's shemen.
That would be shuman. Yes, that would be permitted fat. That's permitted. Sha'al haksalim asar hakasuv loisha b'ser haksalim. The fat on the flanks was Torah prohibited, not the one in the flanks. In the meat, fat in the meat, general rules permitted. V'chein chelev sha'al hakloyes nesar. The loisha b'ser hakloyes. This is a little bit more controversial. If you look at a kidney, this is a cutaway view of a kidney, animal kidney. So it's got a big, I guess like the body of the kidney is the red, and then inside is the white, is the fats. So in the Talmud there's a big debate if you have to remove the fat in the kidney or not, or only the fat on the kidney. So the Rambam says, no, same principle. Only the fat on the kidney is prohibited. The fat in the kidney is permitted. The afal PK, nevertheless, says the Rambam, because there's another opinion that says that you shouldn't do it. The So ideally, you should remove the white substance in the kidney before you eat it. But you don't have to go chasing after it. You remove the white, whatever comes out at the initial removal is fine, and that's good. That's how the Rambam rules. Other authorities, no. They say you have to take out the entire whiteness. You can't eat a kidney until you take out the entire whiteness. Again, today, we don't eat this stuff because it's part of the back half of the animal, which you just throw to the goyim. It's much easier than getting involved. It's not worth the industrial investment for the people that are dealing with this on the high level. Says the Rambam Malacha Ches. There's one exception to this rule of covered fats. Yesh kemoi shtei psilos shel chelev beikre hamasnayim. There are like two cords or strands of fat that are in the primary loin area of the animal. Basically, looking back at this place, over here, up top by the loins. Samuch l'reish hayarich, near the top of the thigh. This fat, even though it's covered by meat, is forbidden. Why?
So we don't have general rules.
Hold on, why? There's a special reason for this. And this is how you know the sages were expert in the anatomy of animals even in their times. When the animal is alive, this fat is actually detached from the meat. While the animal is alive, the fat and the meat do not attach. When the animal dies, it collapses, and the two meats cover the fats. And the untrained eye will not see the fat till you remove the meat from the meat. Nevertheless, it's forbidden. So it's not a part of the rule. It's not part of the category of fat covered by meat because it wasn't covered by meat in its lifetime. However, says the Rambam, you can keep to the general rule. Outside of this special exception for the loins, anytime you will find fat under a layer of meat, the habasar makifaysim sviva of meat is all around it on all sides. And you cannot see the fat till you rip away the meat. It's permitted. Okay, that covers the main elements of the fat. Says the Rambam a little more. Let's talk about fats of specific limbs. Chelev halev v'chelev hame'ayim. Fats around the heart and fats around the intestines. So the intestines, again, in this case, you see the stomachs. This is the beginning of the intestines. After the abomasum, the fourth stomach, it goes into the intestinal tract, and you can see more of the intestines over here. This is like a cutaway, okay? You see this cutaway from the stomachs. Right in the back, it goes into that whole red, complicated wiring. That's the intestines. Yes. Around those intestines, there are fats. So the Rambam says, those fats of the intestines, the small, wrapped around intestines, kulan mutarim, they're all permitted. Vaharehim kashuman shehu mutar, they're like permitted fats, totally permitted, except for one part. Chutz meireish hami'i shesamuch lakeva, except for what's called in English the duodenum. The duodenum is the beginning of.
That's the
yes,
yeah.
exactly. This part over here, okay? Right as the intestinal begins. Here, there's reish me'aya, the duodenum, right here. This beginning part, which leads to the whole intestinal system. The fats around that, the beginning of the intestines, the Talmud says you must scrape off all the fats that's on that initial part for a tefach, for about a handbreadth. This is what's called in the Torah chelev al hadakin, the fats that are on the intestinal system. There's a big argument in the Talmud which this refers to. The Rambam rules, like the opinion that says it's the part that's on the duodenum, on the beginning of the intestinal tract. The Yesh min ha'ga'onim sha'omer, says the Rambam, you should know that there are some of the Ga'onim who says that the tip or the top of the intestinal tract, when the sages spoke of the edge of the intestines that has to be scraped off, they didn't mean the beginning of the intestinal tract. They meant the end. Hu hami'i sheyetze by hari'i, the intestine through which the animal's waste comes out of, at the back of the animal. Shehu soif ha'me'ayim, the last of the digestive organs. That's what it means, reish me'aya in the Talmud. But the Rambam doesn't rule that way. We're going to see later in Laws of Shchita, he clearly indicates that he follows the first view, that it's the beginning of the intestinal tract. Now, this is the main fats that are forbidden. Now that Rambam adds, and here is where we're going to kind of interplay with yesterday's chapter, yesh beguf ha'behema chutin ukrumais shehein asurim. in the body of an animal, there are strands of tissue and membranes, that's like thin coverings over different organs, that are also forbidden. Mehen mishum chelev u'mehen mishum dam. Some of them are forbidden as fat, some are forbidden as blood. B'chol chut oikrum, she'asur mishum kol dam le'seichelu. Any thin strand or any membrane that's forbidden on account of blood, you must first remove that tissue or remove that strand, membrane, then salt the meat to remove the blood, and then you can cook it as we said yesterday. If you cut it, so any blood will be released through the salting process, you don't have to remove it. Same for roasting, you don't have to remove the blood forbidden membrane because it'll come out with the roasting. However, any strand or membrane that's forbidden on account of fat, not account of blood, whether you're cooking it or roasting it, of course you have to remove it before you do anything to it because it's a forbidden fat. Salting won't help it. You have to remove that fat before you eat it. Let's get into detail. There are 5 strands that are forbidden in the flanks. 3 on the right, 2 on the left. And again, we're talking about the flanks, which is the side of the animal. So there's different strands and tissues over here. The 3 strands on the right further divide each one into 2. The 2 on the left split into 3 each. So in the end, you have 6 strands on either side of the animal. The kulan mishum chelev, they're all forbidden on account of fats. The strands of the spleen. This is also, just for illustration, this is a spleen of an animal. And you can see here that, this is actually kind of after. It says,
on top of the kidney?
Yeah, it says here shown with fatty membrane removed. So all you can see is the actual meat of the spleen, plus what's called the hilum. It's a strand that runs through it, that connects it to the muscles above it. So this is the inside of the spleen and the kidneys. Says the Rambam, they also have strands of tissue around them. Mishum chelev, those are forbidden on account of fat. V'chein krum sha'ala tchoil, or krum sha'ala ksolim, or krum sha'ala kloya is also the membranes covering the spleen, covering the flanks, covering the kidneys. Asurin mishum chelev, all those membranes are forbidden as fats. Or krum sha'al dad hatchoil, the membrane on top of the hilum, what's called, dad literally means nipple, because it's like the expression of this sticking out of the spleen. Chayavin alav kares, you're also liable for that. Excision, it's the highest level prohibition. Ushara krum asur ve'en chayavin alav, the rest of the membrane is forbidden, but you're not liable to it for excision. Ushnei krum v'yesh lakulya, there are 2 membranes around the kidney. Ha'elyen chayavin alav kares kachelev shalakulya. The upper one is forbidden with excision, like the fat of the kidney. The hatachten areo kishar krumais, the bottom, the lower membrane is like any other membrane. The chutin shebohen asurin ve'en bayan kares, the strands in them are forbidden with no excision, but the membrane's top one is forbidden, bottom one is top one is forbidden with excision, bottom one is forbidden with no excision. Yud Gimel, chute halev v'chute hayad, the strands of tissue coming out of the heart and the foreleg, v'chute ha'oiketz, v'chute ha'lechia tachton shebetzad ha'lashen, the strands coming out of the tail, the strands coming out of the lower jaw, near the tongue, mikan on either side, v'chein ha'chutin hadakin, shehin b'soich chelev hadakin, the thin strands that are inside the fat covering the intestines, kamei beis achvish misubachin zebazeh, like a spider's web, very, very much intertwined. Ukrum sha'ala moyach shebakodkoid, ukrum sha'ala beitzim, the membrane of the brain and the membrane of the testicles, hakal asurin mishum dam. These membranes are forbidden not for fat, but because they're full of blood. And eating them is like eating blood. So you could kosher them with salting. Beitzei g'diyai toleh, shalai hishlim shleishim yaim. Huh?
You have to roast it.
You have to roast it. Or according to the Rambam, it's even possible to salt it and then cook it.
Really?
Yeah, the Rambam is a little more lenient when it comes to that. Yudalid, beitzei g'diyai toleh, shalai hishlim shleishim yaim. The testicles of a goat or a sheep which hasn't lived for 30 days. Mutar levashlan b'loy klipa. You can cook them with no issue. Not even, you don't have to peel them. La'achar shleishim yaim. Once the animal reaches 30 days old, im nira bahen chutin dakin adumin. If you see red lines in the membrane of the testicles. That means that the blood already began to circulate there. And you cannot cook it till you peel off the membranes or cut them open and then salt it, as we explained. But if you don't see any red lines, even after 30 days, the blood hasn't begun to circulate, mutarin, then it's permitted. And the Rambam repeats a principle from yesterday. The actual intestines where the food goes through, we don't presume that there's blood in there, it's all permitted. Halacha Tazayin Yiroy, the Rambam says, it seems to me, a general rule, all of these strands and all of these membranes that we just discussed, their prohibition is only rabbinic. Even if you want to say that they're biblical, they're included in the prohibitions of fats and bloods, maximum is no punishment. Maximum you get lashes for rabbinic lashes. There'll be maximum considered like eating a half an amount. Let's say for a non-kosher meat, you have to eat an olive size of meat to be liable. What if you eat a half an olive size? It's forbidden. It's called chatzi shir. It's a half of the requisite amount. But while it's biblically prohibited, we can't hold you punishable. Same thing over here that Rambam says, even if it's forbidden biblically, you won't get punished for it. You cannot salt forbidden fats together with meat, nor can you wash them together. The knife that you use to cut forbidden fats, you cannot use to cut regular meat. A bowl that you use to wash fats, you cannot wash meat in it. Therefore, every kosher butcher has to have 3 knives. One that he slaughters with, one that he uses to cut meat, because yesterday you saw that after you slaughter, you can't use the same knife for cutting meat. And a third one to cut the forbidden fats. If the custom in the city was that the butchers would wash their meat in the stores, he has to have 2 bowls of water. One to wash meat, one to wash fats. The fat are very shiny. So many butchers used to take the whole fat of the flanks, which is forbidden to be eaten, and they would spread it on a cut of meat to make it look nice. Because you can't do that. Why? Even though technically there's a membrane covering the fat, and the fat won't leak onto the meat, the Rambam says, that membrane is very thin. It's very possible while the butcher is handling it, it's going to become soft in his hands. And that will cause the fat to ooze out onto the meat, absorbed into it, and it causes the whole thing to be forbidden. However, the Rambam says, even though it's all forbidden to do this, if they were done, it doesn't cause the meat to be forbidden. We don't hit anybody who did it, we just teach him not to do that. You cannot salt meat before you remove all the membranes and all the forbidden strands. If you already salted the meat, remove them after the fact, it's okay. Even if the sciatic nerve is there, which we're going to learn about at length tomorrow, you simply remove it after it's salted and you cook it as is. Of course, if you already cooked it with the stuff inside of it, then it's forbidden. But as long as you didn't cook it yet, even if you salted it with the forbidden stuff, remove it and it's fine. Now, the Rambam says, if you have a butcher whose custom was to clean out the meat from all the forbidden fats, so you're relying on him to do what's called nikur, he is going to check all the stuff, and when you buy from him, you want to know that you're buying totally kosher meat. And somebody found after his work that there was leftover tissue or membrane. So one strike, you're not out yet. We teach him to, and we warn him not to be cheap with these forbidden membranes. But if you find actual fat after his checking, if it was a barley corn size, we fire him. He's out of the business. If in total he left over a full olive-sized portion of forbidden fats, even if it's from a bunch of places together, we fire him and we lash him. Because the butcher is believed about the fats. We're relying on him. We're trusting him. And here you're going and feeding, forbidden foods. That's a huge problem. And so we have to fire him and give him lashes. Unfortunately, this stuff persists till today. Just a couple of years ago, before Pesach, there was that huge scandal in the meat store over there. He was selling forbidden stuff the whole time. It's actually crazy how much we put our trust and our faith in kosher butchers. They require Yirat Shamayim. They have to be full of fear of heaven, because that's why all our food is coming from them. And that's why it's so strict when they don't treat it rightly, to the point that we do this kind of harsh action. On the other hand, by default, they are believed, and you can buy all kosher food from them.